Good evening, I'm Mike Gousha, and yeah, I know it's Wednesday, but this is Sunday night. 17 years, nearly 800 shows. Tonight, we call it a wrap on Sunday night. But not before spending a few final moments with some of the people who made this show possible. We're talking about the authors, the athletes, the newsmakers, and the entertainers. So stick around, and for the next hour, forget which day of the week it is, because this is the final Sunday night. And welcome again to Sunday night. We're glad you could be with us for our final show. When we put Sunday night on the air back in 1989, we had high hopes and a low budget. It was old school, a kind of stripped-down talk show where on most Sunday nights it was just the guest and me sitting at this table having a conversation. We didn't have a magic formula for selecting guests. We were just looking for interesting people. People like Jerry Harrison, one of the founders of the groundbreaking rock band Talking Heads. Harrison was living in Whitefish Bay at the time, and he was perhaps an unlikely choice for a first guest, but we asked, he said yes, and off we went.
Tell me about those days in high school when you were playing in bands.
It was a very special time. Basically what happened is that bands became cooler than athletics.
Well,
and so like these friends of mine had this group called the Relaxers, and they stood, they stood for everything that was the opposite of being a jock.
Once we got started, we found people could surprise you when they had a chance to escape our soundbite world for a full half hour. Remember some of the athletes we had on. They were eager to talk not just about sports, but life.
Probably the worst thing that happened to our community was desegregation. Because when we were segregated, we had the lawyers, the doctors, the athletes, the nurses. We had black professionals living in the communities. But when desegregation came about, all those professionals moved out into the suburbs. So they left the pimps, the game bangers, the hookers, you know, the drug dealers as our people's heroes. And so what we have to do as professionals, black professionals in particular, we have to create opportunities where we're putting our finances and our times back into our communities.
Do you feel that the press treated you fairly as a whole, or were there occasions where you just said, you know, I'm getting an image of a person I'm not. That's not me.
I was certainly misunderstood, but I only have myself really to blame for all the complications. I could have made it easier. When I finally figured that out and took the extra step to deal with the press in a more engaging way, everything worked out well.
Are you a better man today, do you feel?
You know, I'd like to think so.
Better husband?
I'd like to think so. Better father, I'd like to think so. Better quarterback, yeah, you know. And I remember after I'd quit drinking, it was the following season. They had been off pain pills for quite some time, and we were playing somewhere, and after the game, I was walking off the field, and somebody hollered from over the bleachers or the rail or something and said, "You need to go back and start drinking or something." And I started laughing, you know, maybe, as dumb of a statement as that was from someone, it made me realize right then that football is not the most important thing. Because if it ever came down to that, football would have to take a back seat.
Women want to know, did you have to lay down the law to them? Did you have to say,
Absolutely.
I'm not going to tolerate this anymore, you're going to have to clean up your act?
I did. I was actually pregnant with Freely, and there's probably some things I could tell you, but I shouldn't.
That's okay.
But I actually, you know, did. I mean, we were going to be separated if it didn't change. Things had to change.
And so he got the message, obviously.
You have to. You can't live that way. I mean, it's just, it's not normal. It's not good for a family. I mean, it's just, it was pretty bad.
When you're growing up, you're searching for an identity, and sports was always a way for me, you know, being in a military family, growing up all over the place was a way for me to meet people, and you know, it was my gift. I mean, I can't paint you a picture or sing you a song, but I express myself through sport, and just in terms of confidence and you know, self-assurance and time management and just overall physical health. I mean, I'm indebted to sports.
Sometimes we ended up with more than we expected. I remember interviewing the Brewers' Paul Molitor back in 1990 and brought up the subject of his past drug use. It was his first candid discussion of the subject.
I'd like to think that it was a flirtation, but really it was more than that. Because as I think back, there was no question I reached a dangerous level a few times. And I think that realizing, first of all, that it wasn't what God wanted me to be doing, more than anything, realizing that I was not only risking relationships, but risking my career, risking my life, that finally the message got through that I had to put that chapter behind me.
Pressure to me, you know, I grew up in Mobile, Alabama, so I grew up in the pressure cooker, you know, when segregation, you know, and all that. I saw Ku Klux Klans march through my neighborhood, you know, and things like that. So challenging Babe Ruth record and some of the things was some of the letters that I received, although they were, I'd say I was kind of mystified at it and kind of dumbfounded from the fact that I couldn't understand why people were so incensed with me breaking a record.
The Hall of Fame quarterback Terry Bradshaw revealed there was a very different guy behind the jokester we saw on TV.
I don't want to be goofy, but I just like laughing, and I like having fun. And although life is so serious, so short and yet so serious, and I'm sure in my many hours of therapy that I've been in with my counselors, the answers are, you know, you do it for a reason, to protect this or protect that, or maybe it's because of, you know, the way you were raised or the way things happen in Pittsburgh early in your career. I don't know, but I find that humor makes me feel good, and people laugh, and when people laugh, I feel like they like me, and I like to make them laugh any harder.
But the subjects weren't always so serious. The golden boy, Paul Hornung, was good for a few laughs.
All right, I got to ask you this question. After reading the book about the nights out, which you and Max...
It had a lot of good ones out here in Milwaukee. We had a way to get out of the Pfister Hotel that nobody knew about.
You were able to handle that old bed check thing?
That was our hotel.
Not a problem.
Yeah, I loved the Pfister. We loved the Pfister.
All right,
had a lot of holes in it, you know.
I like to laugh, and so we had a number of comedians on over the years. This was Frank Caliendo back in 2002. The Waukesha native's career was just starting to take off thanks to an uncanny impression of football legend John Madden.
Madden will say something like, hey, that guy right there, that guy's got mud on his jersey. And now there's less mud on the field. And now he's got to get a clean jersey.
John Madden, best known for his brilliant work on the telestrator.
Brilliant.
We have set up, we have our own very own telestrator. We put it in front of Frank, and we're going to put some images up on the screen and let John Madden go to work.
Right here is where you're going to you walk through here, because if you try to walk over here or over here, you're going to be in flower pots right there, or if you get caught in a tree. I knew a monkey one time, he got caught in a tree, and he was stapled to a chicken. That's a punchline to a different joke. And then this is water right here. Now, if you're a fish and you're coming to Summerfest, this is probably where you want to be. If you're not a fish, or if you're not amphibious, you don't want to be in here because that's water. And there was a guy I knew one time who could walk across that, but that's a different story. That's a great book, by the way.
We also caught up with Dana Carvy and Mike Myers right before Wayne's World changed their worlds forever. They were tired and squirrely and very funny.
Which brings us to middle-aged man.
Oh, middle-aged man.
Yes. Looking at my gut, aren't you?
Well, this is the thing. This is what happened. If we can get a close-up, but I don't want to scare you or disgust you. It's disgusting. I'm 26, and already I got a gut.
And I'm doing this character, the grumpy old man. I don't like things now the way they used to be. In my day, we had one size shoe, size 7. If your foot was too big, you crammed your foot into it. By the end of the day, your foot was a bleeding stump. And that's the way it was, and you liked it. You loved it.
Yes,
We just love our job, Mike. We're happy and humble.
A great show of you doing the angry old man and middle-aged man. And
grumpy old man.
We wanted to do that. We
Yeah.
wanted to have like a
We did.
round table to have annoying man,
And grumpy old man.
and middle-aged man.
Arguing, why don't they have names? Why don't you have a name?
Why don't you have a name?
I'm talking about you.
Oh, shut up, you old man.
You're annoying. No, you're a middle-aged man, and you're annoying, man.
And you were looking at his gut. I saw that.
I did.
Look at my gut.
This was 1990. Two guys whose hair used to be dark. One of them was about to become Tonight Show host.
Could it be hotter in here, possibly in this room? Could it be hotter in this room?
And you know, this is perfect because you're going to go on stage and just a couple.
I know. Can I take my jacket off?
Sure.
It's like the hottest, it's like an interrogation room. Surprised you don't have a hose for this interview. Yeah, I never sweat when it's 100 in here. Why, thank you, the coat disappeared.
It disappears. We have a hairdryer, too, that is kind of the
like
broadcast.
The hottest room I've ever been in. I feel like I've been lying. No, I really don't like those comedians. Well, leave me alone, will you? Give me a break.
And then there's Will Durst, the political satirist who grew up in Milwaukee, became almost a regular here. 9 appearances by our count.
You are an equal opportunity offender. We'll give you plenty of opportunities.
I'd love to take out the Democrats, but there's nothing there. It's like trying to strangle smoke.
Will liked to refer to himself as an equal opportunity butt-burr. And when we come back, we'll hear from some other folks who could get people riled up. And then later, stories of inspiration from everyday people.
People to come up with the legendary. You know that. You know what that means. It means old, O-L-D. You know, if you're a legend, you're old.
Welcome back to the final Sunday night. One of the things we wanted to do with this show was make it a place for strong opinions, all kinds of opinions. And these folks like to stir it up.
The title of the book, Rush Limbaugh's Big Fat Idiot, was meant to some degree ironically. It was sort of using what he does. He makes ad hominem attacks about people, particularly the president, his wife, and unfortunately he did about their daughter. And I just tried to use what he does against him.
Americans of European descent will be a minority in the United States. Most of the American people, or the people in this country, will be recent immigrants. They will come from Asia, China, the Far East, Africa, Latin America. I think the American Southwest will be virtually a part of Mexico again. There are 35 million Hispanics in the country right now. There were only about 2 million a few years ago, and their numbers are increasing. And I believe the Mexican government quite simply has virtually a program to reconquer those parts of the American Southwest that they lost in the Mexican War. Europe will be...
You believe that?
Oh, yes. I mean, they say so as much. Many of them. They call it La Reconquista.
We all believe politicians will take money from anyone, but I really wanted to test the theory. Will they take money from anyone? All right. So I formed a number of nonprofit groups and got a bank to give me checking accounts for each of them with the names of the groups on the checks. And then I sent $100 to Bob Dole, $100 check from the Satan Worshippers for Dole Club to see if he'd cash it. $100 to Pat Buchanan from Abortionists for Buchanan. $100 to Bill Clinton from the Hemp Growers of America. And $100 to Ross Perot from the Pedophiles for Free Trade. And who do you think cashed the check first?
Buchanan, right?
That's right. Mr. Right to Life cashed the Abortionist for Buchanan check. And I thought, well, maybe he thought it said anti-abortion. So I tried a new group. I sent him a $75 check from the John Wayne Gacy fan club. And he cashed that check, too.
The underlying conflict is between a message that says, follow your heart, and a message that says, do your duty. And the more conservative message being the message that says, do your duty, follow the rules, look to the eternal verities, look to the long-term future. The follow your heart message being the one that says, oh yeah, but we love each other so much, and who would want to stand in the way of our love, and why not honor marriage that follows people's feelings rather than some immutable standards. And this is seen with attitudes toward the military, with attitudes toward defense of the country, toward almost every divisive issue. It's that follow your heart versus do your duty.
But why do some women hesitate to call themselves feminists? They're not comfortable with the word.
Well, I think there are two reasons. One is because they have been deceived about what the word means. I mean, we've had quite a few years of right-wing effort from Reagan and Bush to the Moral Majority to the Christian Coalition, you know, to distort the words like feminism, like affirmative action, like liberal, and make them into something else. So if it is defined as it truly is, then something like 60% of American women, according to a Lou Harris poll this year, identify themselves as feminists.
Black America at the moment is so locked into a politics that basically is entirely devoted to the manipulation of white attitudes. We feel the thing that I catch hell for theoretically as a black conservative is that I'm letting whites off the hook, as though our entire advancement is determined by whether or not we can keep whites back on their heels. My sense, this is a profound mistake, a waste of time. It has not been productive. We ended up with policies that have been more oppressive than helpful.
The controversial thing is totally tied to race. It's the fact that I'm writing from a black perspective on the Metro page of the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel. As a black man, I'm presenting a perspective that I think a lot of white readers either have not been exposed to, or they see it as threatening, or even more so, they see it as accusing them of things, which I get a lot. You're always talking about how much, you know, white people are to blame for everything, and I've never seen myself writing that column. That's a column I've yet to write, how white people are responsible for everything in society.
What do you think we expect from schools today? Do we expect them to be not just educators, but babysitters?
Yes.
What do we expect from our schools?
Everything. We expect them to be nannies, social workers, psychotherapists, nurses, nutritionists. We expect them to deal with death education, driver's education, basic life skills. And then we wonder why it is that we have a generation of kids who can't come out reading or writing very well.
What are we supposed to say to the two parties? Can we wait another 4 years and then can we run? Should we wait another 4 years and ask them whether we can run? They have forfeited the trust of the American people. Just look at the comments of Russ Feingold and Paul Wellstone and John McCain. They're just very critical of the corruption in politics and how these corporations are buying and renting our politicians, who in turn shake them down.
Incidentally, Ralph Nader refused makeup for his appearance on that show. He said he couldn't be sure that animals hadn't been used in the manufacturing of the makeup. Nader obviously never made it to the White House, but we talked to a couple of folks who knew all about the West Wing.
You were a rarity, though. Let's face it, there were not a lot of women. It was largely a man's world.
Well, it's interesting because there are not an awful lot of women in diplomacy, but I do think that the ability to care about what's happening to the person on the other side of the table, kind of to put yourself in the other guy's shoes, which is essential, and also to try to develop some consensus. I think we are a little bit different in that, though I am not one of these people who thinks the world would be entirely different if there were more women leaders, because I did believe and do believe that at times you have to use force to back up your principles.
Bill Clinton, to me, is defined by his contradictions. On the one hand, incredibly intelligent. On the other hand, just can blind himself to obvious, risks and facts sitting before his face. Very empathetic. Can really feel people's pains, the old cliche. On the other hand, capable of acting in such a ruthlessly cold and calculated manner when pressed, even if it means betraying his wife and child.
Over the years, Sunday night became a home for political debates. We wanted voters to see candidates think on their feet and had very few ground rules.
Are you willing to tell voters here tonight that you will not sign a budget that contains a tax increase?
I do not want a tax increase, and I won't sign one with a tax increase.
Let me turn it around and ask you the same question. Can you make a pledge to voters that you're not going to sign a budget that contains tax increases?
Yes, I can. We are not in this mess because the taxpayers of the state haven't done their fair share.
And the fact is that the only provisions that I've objected to, and I thought they were dangerous, had to do with situations where there is no evidence of a connection to a terrorist. So it has to do with protecting our freedom.
Just real, you asked him and he said, well, I don't know of any specific examples, but there's been terrorist tax overseas.
I gave a specific example from a federal report about internet companies. I was very specific.
I really think he's hanging by a thread on this thing. I really do. But I want to make it very clear. I'm as concerned about civil liberty violations as anyone in this country, as a veteran. I swore to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States.
If your plan is to make us like Detroit, that's not going to work.
Well, they've made real progress in development.
Well, they had a long way to go.
Development won't occur. It is beginning to occur in Detroit. It won't occur here until we lift that burden of crime off of our citizens.
The commercial breaks in debates were always interesting for us. Some candidates wouldn't talk to each other, while others, like George Watts and John Norquist, continued arguing right through them. Now, one of the things we often heard from you was that you wanted serious discussion of serious issues. And so we tackled topics like the clergy sex abuse scandal, steroids in baseball, and illegal immigration.
For those that do come forward, it often takes into adulthood or well into adulthood to be able to acknowledge and recognize what happened to them. I was convinced that there was something wrong with me.
Did you feel you could tell anyone?
No, I felt I was the criminal. See, that's the dynamics of child abuse are such that the perpetrator doesn't feel the shame. The shame is all on the side of the child.
The number of priests who have been have some kind of allegations against them with regard to abuse of minors is no greater than the rest of the population. It's about the same. But when it happens in the church, the effects are so much more devastating, and the victims are so much more hurt, not only as they would psychologically, but also in terms of their faith. That's why it's so serious, and probably more serious than it would have been otherwise.
But I do think that we need a more stringent policy, but this is an evolutionary thing. And Mike, what I want to say to you is I think our testing policy now was a good first start. But this is evolution, and we need to do more.
As you know, you become the bad guy in this debate for some people, and have been the target of a lot of personal criticism. How do you feel about that?
Goes with the territory. I like to talk about issues. I don't like name-calling. Some of this name-calling is modern-day McCarthyism, where you call names rather than discuss the issues.
We also devoted entire shows to the Jeffrey Dahmer case. We really didn't know what to expect when then Police Chief Philip Arreola came on to talk about his decision to fire 2 officers for not investigating an earlier contact they had with the serial killer.
The point of it is, what did they do? What did they do? Now, there are any number of things that they could have done, but they didn't do anything.
Within hours, the officers came on to tell their side of the story.
I wish there had been some other piece of evidence or information available to us if we would have seen something that stood out in the apartment or something, if we could have taken another direction.
Years later, it would be Chief Nan Haggerty explaining why she fired several officers for their involvement in the Frank Jude beating case.
There is no doubt that this man was beaten. Mr. Jude was beaten mercilessly.
And you know people saw it.
Absolutely.
Your
Absolutely
officers.
saw it. My officer saw it, absolutely. Didn't come forward, didn't give us the information. Everybody clammed up so that when the Professional Performance Division got on the scene, they didn't have any information to work with.
Times change, but sometimes it seems the stories remain oddly familiar. When we come back, we'll meet the people we love to watch and to read. And later, they're gone, but definitely not forgotten. You're watching The Final Sunday Night.
Well, you were a good defensive
Well,
player.
yeah, that's what they said, too. They said that, yeah. It was good after. I was good on street corners, good after curfew, stuff like that.
Somebody once warned me about actors as guests. They can be glib, he said, but they really won't reveal a lot. But I've got to say, I enjoyed the actors we had on Sunday night, and several in particular.
And I just wanted to kind of be all over the map as far as a range of characters. And if I could make, you know, I did a TV thing about George Washington called The Crossing. If I could make George Washington as believable as the guy in Dumb and Dumber, as the guy in Pleasantville, as the guy in Escanaba, you know, if I can really kind of just spread them out and have everybody go, oh, that's what actors do.
But so many people know you for the role of Gandhi.
Good.
Is it a blessing or a curse? Is it a curse to have people always remember you for them?
It's an enormous blessing, because I won an Academy Award for it, and it's a film that is seen very frequently on cable, DVD, video. It's a spectacularly well-made film. Without it, I wouldn't have done films like Sexy Beast or House of Sand and Fog or all my other work.
You're known as a guy, I mean, who's kind of this smooth ladies' man, but were you ever comfortable with that portrayal of you? Or did you feel like you were being stereotyped as, oh, this is what Billy D. Williams is?
Well, I won't say I'm uncomfortable with it.
There are worse things than being,
being
thought of that way, yeah.
And then there was Leslie Nielsen, the star of Naked Gun and Airplane. He was a nearly 70-year-old man with an 8-year-old sense of humor. We should have known this would be a weird show. Check out the set here. Our other one was being rebuilt at the time.
How do you like these digs? Pretty nice.
When will he be in? Do you think I have time to go to?
he won't be in right away, will he? This is what I came up with, you know, because you can control the flow of air and make it as difficult as you wish, or, you know, and as soon as I get the kinks ironed out of it, I'm going to patent it, you know. And, but right now, it's very tough to get your exercise and laugh at the same time.
Of course, Nielsen was made famous by some Shorewood guys, film directors Jerry and David Zucker.
I think there's kind of a Midwestern sense of humor that is, I don't know, it's warmer, it's a little more self-deprecating. Maybe, you know, I know in our satire is filled with it. Even Ghost has a lot of that sensibility.
In fact, one of the things that surprised me doing this show was just how many film directors came from Milwaukee. There were documentary makers, Chris Smith and Sarah Price, Chip Duncan and Steve Betcher. Nils Mueller made a great first film called The Assassination of Richard Nixon. Chris Ochin made a horror flick called Reeseville. And then there was George Tillman, Jr., Milwaukee Marshall grad who made the Hollywood hits Soul Food and Men of Honor. He was a success story, but not completely sold on his industry.
Did people say to you, we're not sure about this?
It's so interesting. 5 companies passed on this script. One company even told me the reason this film, it will not work because no one gets killed in the film.
Somebody told you that?
Someone told me that.
What is that? That's really sad.
Yeah, that's sad. It made me realize, hey, I have the opportunity to raise my own money. I did it once. I can do it again. I just have to do it independently if that means that that's what I have to do.
One of my favorite guests was Mequon native John Ridley Jr., an author, writer, and director who worked in TV and films. He always had a unique take on the world.
Now it's all about, I got to hit the lotto. I got to be a .com millionaire. Right. I got to get a spec script. And there's nothing wrong with having money. I love money as much as the next guy. I want to make as much money as possible, but I think you forget that what it's really good for is making sure that your kids have a little bit more, making sure that your parents are taken care of when they're old and they retire and things like that.
Ridley always saw himself as an author first, and we like to feature authors. David Marinis became almost a regular. He wrote great books about Bill Clinton, the Vietnam War, baseball star Roberto Clemente. But for those of us in Wisconsin, perhaps his best-known book was about Vince Lombardi.
Well, I think he became a symbol of the American ethos of competition and success and winning. You go to like an insurance salesman's office in Des Moines, Iowa, and you'll see the Lombardi Credo on his wall.
Local author Jackie Machard dropped by not long after she appeared on Oprah, and life would never be the same.
If I have a gift, it's not writing, it's friendship. I have the most phenomenal friends you could imagine. I mean, they're like the TV movie version of Friends.
We also had the pleasure to spend a half hour with the one and only Studs Terkel.
Why did you feel this book needed to be written at this point?
We are so lost, seems to me, in that we have no sense of past. Especially the young, through no fault of their own, have no idea what happened in the Great Depression of the 30s, let alone World War II or Vietnam War in some cases. So if you live without a past, what's the present anchorage? What's the future like? It's all related. This is what we're talking about.
The author of Sex and the City, Candace Bushnell, also joined us a couple of years ago.
I think that men don't really get women at all, in some ways. Well, I mean, they do a little bit. But in general, men have made a lot of assumptions about the way women are or the way women are supposed to be.
When Candace Bushnell sat down on our set as we got ready to roll tapes, she looked at the wide camera shot, that's the shot you're looking at there, and said, it looks like I don't have a skirt on. And I asked her if that was a problem, and she quickly told me, no, it's not. Maybe not a surprise. Up next, a little music for the soul. This is the final Sunday night.
We say no, 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 don't pass me over. No, 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 don't pass me by. See, I can see good things for you and I.
As you've probably guessed, the Sunday night show often reflected my tastes, for better or worse. And I like music, so we invited a lot of musicians on the show. There was Milwaukee jazz legend Al Jarreau.
Tomorrow, today, is anybody thinking?
Phil Collins' talented guitarist, Whitefish Bay resident Daryl Sturmer. The Bodines were frequent visitors. The Guffs were here. They're now releasing a new CD. And we heard from Milwaukee institutions like Paul Cebar and Robin Pleur.
Now I can see you clear from here. Would you please leave me alone? I am wonderful. I'm so wonderful.
Pat McCurdy and Willie Porter.
I learned a little about forgiveness, a little about sin.
But along with the music, there was always talk.
I mean, what were those early days like?
Well, we had a real strong commitment, and we went out when our first album was toured, and we toured for 6 months straight, never staying in a hotel. And at the end of the show, people would come up to us and say, well, man, you guys are great. And we'd say, oh, can we stay at your house tonight?
You're not big on the country music business, as long as we're on the subject.
On what it has become, are you?
Nope.
What has it become in your mind?
Phony baloney.
A lot of clones out there?
Oh, yes. I think you just hit the nail on the head. Anytime money becomes a factor, anytime... See, there was this whole group. There was George Strait, Reba McEntire, Randy Travis, the Judds. There were all these people that couldn't not sing, and we were just eat up with it. And we all had stories. I mean, we were country songs. And then all of a sudden, because it was that cha-ching, cha-ching, cash register started ringing because country music just... They started having focus groups and marketing meetings. And
Welcome to television.
And now, you know, it's what you see is principally formulaic, depending on how the band wants to come off. If it's a rap group, it's scantily clad women and bling bling, you know.
It is.
And if
it's formula. You're right.
And if it's you know, one of these goth bands, well, then they're in the dark and they're wet and covered with mud or something like that, you know.
Creative.
Yeah, well, it's there isn't really any sort of a movement to, you know, to make creative videos for MTV, in part because MTV hardly plays videos anymore.
I've always been struck by the fact that many people seem to feel so emotionally connected to you. Did you sense that from your audience, that somehow they feel you're telling their story through your music?
Yeah, I love putting my emotions into words, you know, and there have been times where I felt like I've been doing it on behalf of some people. You know, I didn't know that until after Jagged Little Pill was released, and I saw how many people related to it, and there was a comfort to that.
Was that a comfortable feeling?
It was. There was comfort to it, and there was also, you know, horror, because I'm thinking, you know, that it's just all about me, and nothing like this ever happens to anyone else, and then all of a sudden I realized that that's absolutely not the case, and so that was good.
Graham Nash, I think, said that you were the ultimate consumer in life. Whether it was fine wine, fine food, the best drugs, fine women, but you wanted it all. You wanted the very best. And that's got to be a very different existence from the one you have today.
I think that's a more generous description of it than I would give, it. I would say I was built without brakes.
And sometimes there was a lesson, like the time jazz great Billy Taylor visited with us.
Let me ask you this. Do people know what to listen for in jazz? I mean, maybe you could play a little something for us and we could talk about what we're listening to and the different things that are happening with the music. Could we do something like that?
Sure.
A little bit?
I took a piece by George Gershwin. Now, if I want to make a jazz piece out of it, I have to apply the jazz vocabulary. And there is a whole language that jazz musicians use. But first, what I have to do is to change the rhythm of it. So I would, in applying that vocabulary, I'd use some of the rhythmic vocabulary. Okay, having changed the rhythm, why don't I change the harmony? Okay, I've changed the rhythm, I've changed the harmony. Why don't I change the melody?
Once in a while, people would end up saying things that, at the time, seemed harmless enough. Milwaukee R&B artist Eric Benet was dating actress Halle Berry as this show was taped. In fact, she was in town on that day, but not in the studio. If she had been, she might have remembered this exchange.
I grew up here in Milwaukee.
Right.
I mean, for everyone that knew me and who knows me, back in the day, being in high school, I've always been the nerd, the man who has no game with the females, the man who, you know, I don't know, it may take me a year to get up the nerve to say hi,
yeah.
You know, and that's always been me. So for me to now be Mr. Romeo in the R&B industry or the music business is funny. It's hilarious. I mean, I'm still very much the nerd, you know. I just got a good publicist and a good marketing team behind me. It's
Benet and Berry later married and divorced after he admitted he hadn't been faithful. When I was a kid, I dreamed of being an architect, so it was a treat to interview Santiago Calatrava, the man who designed the addition to the Milwaukee Art Museum.
I think museums has to become more and more open to the community. And museums has also not only to be places in which you display art, but they has to be, if it is possible, also meeting places, attractive places where people go also just to take a coffee.
And it was a 60s flashback moment when pop artist Peter Max joined us.
I consider myself an artist whose canvas is the media, you know, and I always think that if Picasso, Matisse, or Gauguin, if they were alive today, they'd probably want to be on MTV.
Yeah, they would.
You know, they would, they really would. It's a canvas, and the media, television, it's a tremendous canvas for an artist.
If Peter Max was all about whimsy, then the journalists we met over the years were all about reality. Here were several of our favorites.
Nothing in my lifetime, I suppose, outside of the nuclear age has transformed the world like cyber technology will. It is the single most empowering tool that I have ever seen, and we are really only at the primitive stages of it.
Let's talk for a moment about Wisconsin. This is a fun state for people who follow politics, isn't it?
That's the best. I was born in Buffalo. Milwaukee reminds me so much of Buffalo, I cannot tell you. We have a Catholic church and a saloon on every corner. But it is wonderful people, well-grounded. They love life, they love their families, they love their politics.
You know, at the end of the day, as anyone who's ever anchored programs knows, at the end of the day, you go home. And you wash the makeup off your face, and it's kind of you in the mirror. And that's what's left. And you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, what did I do today? Did I make things better or did I make things worse? And you hope that if you do 200 some programs a year, that 200 times you can say I made things better, and every now and then you chase the runaway bride.
Up next, the people who inspired us and those who will never be forgotten. Back on Sunday night in a moment.
Let's talk about lessons learned from the Apollo 13 mission.
The Apollo 13 had some very good lessons. One was how to handle crisis, whether they're personal or they're in business or they're in space. You can't panic.
Welcome back. Over the years, we interviewed a number of Olympic heroes, including speed skaters Dan Jansen, Bonnie Blair, Casey Fitzrandolph, and Chris Whitty, soccer star Mia Hamm, and gymnasts Paul and Morgan Hamm. But for me, two of our most powerful shows featured survivors. One was a local woman named Terry Jendusa-Nicolai. She was a battered woman whose ex-husband beat her and left her for dead in a freezing storage locker. But Terry wouldn't die.
What's keeping you going? You're thinking, I'm going to die, but yet you're also thinking about your daughters. Is that what kept you going?
That's it. It was a very eerie, I'm a spiritual person, but I never realized before how spiritual I was until I got to that moment. And I thought to myself, you know I'm not perfect. I've made mistakes in life, but I know I'll be okay if I do die now. But right away, it was just that fear and that sheer terror, what's going to happen to my kids? And that is what kept me fighting and fighting and fighting, and I wouldn't give up.
And then there was former Marquette assistant basketball coach Trey Schwab. He nearly died waiting for a transplant. Finally got it, then almost died again. Should have died from a massive blood clot.
The stories go that you were virtually dead. Is that accurate?
I was dead. I was dead for about 50 minutes. Had no pulse, no blood pressure.
No respiratory function?
No respiratory function. You know, they had me on a ventilator, and there were people literally sitting on top of me doing CPR as they're rolling me down the hallway to try to get me to the operating room to figure out what was going on.
Your doctor, Dr. Love, at the news conference, called this a miracle. Now, this is a man who is a very accomplished physician, and sometimes you don't hear doctors use the word miracle a lot. But he said he had no other explanation for the fact that you are here, that your mind functions as it did before this, despite 50 minutes of no blood pressure and no pulse. He said it's an absolute miracle.
It is. I mean, there are a couple of physiological things you could maybe use to try to explain it. The fact that I had the IPF, the disease that kind of starves your body of oxygen. My body was probably used to going on, you know, a lot less oxygen than most people, but to be down that long with, you know, no real, you know, heart function or lung function, oxygen getting to your organs, you know, it is very, I mean, it's a miracle. It's the only way you can describe it.
Today, Trey Schwab is alive and well, helping others understand the need for organ donation. But a few of our guests are no longer with us.
How is the public's response to you changed since the Simpson trial? Initially, after the verdict came in, and you talk about this at length in the book, you were a hero in the African-American community, and yet reviled by some in the white community. Has that changed?
I think certainly in the majority community, it's changed. The most common remark I will hear now is people will say, you know, I don't agree with that verdict in that case, but if I'm ever in trouble, I want you to be my lawyer. I hear that an awful lot.
If I had it to do over again, I would try to do it better.
Mm-hmm. But you're proud of what you've done, aren't you?
Well, pride is a bad word, but I'm happy with what I've done, but I could have done more.
What are you most proud of during the 12 years you served as mayor in this community, and during the many years you've been involved in this community's welfare?
I think I like to think most of my struggles for civil rights and equal rights, where I thought that everybody, no matter wherever they came from, would have the same rights, but also the same responsibilities. Now, that latter half wasn't too well received, but the former half was.
We need to, as people, reach out to other people, and we're going to be together forever in this environment. And if we can be together in a way that we get to know each other, we work together, we help each other, we can enhance each other's lives, because the more I meet people from different backgrounds, from different cultures, from different religious groups, the more I learn, the better person I become. And I think that all of us could benefit from that. And, you know, I think if we all did that, we'd have a much, much better community and a better world.
It is alive. And if you're lucky enough to get to be on that stage with that spotlight shining towards you, you must remember you wouldn't be there if there wasn't some people sitting on the other side of that light. I owe them.
I'd like being Al McGuire. I never wanted to be anyone else, and it's kind of, you know, puffy and chesty and so on. But I like my quiet time. I like my time alone, and I also believe that overexposure quickly buries you, and that allow the next person his moment on the stage. You know, I've had my run. I want more. I'm human. I wanted to retire in my late 40s, if I could. I wanted to retire at 45. And then I wanted to go out of the business world, Mike, and sports world for about 10 years. And then return, because I think you need work later in life. True. And I think you need retirement when you can climb the hill, when you can eat the steak, when you can enjoy the moment. Certain amount of pain is happiness, and bare feet and wet grass and a flower on the side of the hill, that type of thing. So that's what I did. But now I'm cheating. You know, I'm cheating. I'm staying too long at the soft end.
Some final thoughts when we come back. Before we go tonight, I'd like to say a few thank yous. I want to thank this TV station for giving us the freedom to interview who we wanted, when we wanted, no questions asked. I want to thank the people who worked on this show over the years, who cared deeply about it and made it their own. Producers Mary Alice Tierney, Fran Davis, Lynn Kilb, and Wendy Strong. Videotape editor Donna Weller. And finally, the two people I work with today, executive producer Gary Rystad and videotape editor Paul Balistreri. I was very fortunate to have such great co-conspirators and great friends. And last, I'd like to thank you, the viewers. Thanks for your feedback, your loyalty, and your support. We really didn't know what to expect when we put this show on the air 17 years ago. As it turned out, it was far more than we could have hoped for. So for one final time, thanks for staying up late with us all those Sunday nights. I'm Mike Gousha. Good night.